Okay. Thanks everyone for joining, whether you're watching this live or in retrospect. I really appreciate it. I'm trying to get information out there of how corrupt I think this impeachment situation is. And I think I'm going at it from angles that I don't see other people. So thank you very much if you're participating. And please feel free to share this information. Use it to make your own videos, whatever you can. But I'd really appreciate if you share my YouTube channel, my Twitter feed, and the videos I'm doing with other people. So let's just jump right into it. Excuse the kind of the way I have it set up where you can see my YouTube panel here. I'm going to be going directly to back and forth between this and the specific evidence I'm talking about. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about here is you've probably heard that there's some kind of shadiness that's going on because the actual intelligence community changed the rules for what it means to be a whistleblower almost exactly at the same time that we saw this whistleblower come forward. And so I'm going to go to the document that shows that. I'm going to be using Dan Bongino's website, but you could use The Federalist was the one that broke this story. Both are good sources. So let me just talk a little about what this means to begin with. So it used to be a whistleblower, you had to have direct firsthand knowledge of something. And that makes sense because all of us hear rumors all the time. I've been joking on Twitter for like a week now that's like, I'm as much of a whistleblower as this person. Because he's saying, I heard people saying that Trump was shady and did some shady things and had a shady call. And, I read reports in the New York Times that back that up. So I'm a whistleblower. Well, I've heard all sorts of shady things about Obama and Hillary Clinton from people that claim they were in the intel community and that there were shady things going on. I've read reports in different news outlets that have said there was shadiness. So does that make me a whistleblower as well? Of course not. Now, I just want to take a minute here and let you chew on this for a second. Remember, it's bad enough that we know that the mainstream media is corrupt. And I talk about this all the time on my channel, that one of the problems is the establishment left controls the public narrative. And the way they do that is they control all of the cultural institutions of power that shape that public narrative. So there are all these institutions that kind of control what our public discourse is. And that would be the mainstream media, the entertainment industry, Silicon Valley, academia. When they've controlled all of these for decades, that controls what we're talking about in the public. The Republicans are always on the defensive. We're always saying, or conservatives or independents or whatever you are, even if you're a left-wing person who's not part of this establishment, you're always just responding to what these groups put out as the public conversation. And so that's bad enough. And we could see, the greatest thing that Trump's done is outed the corruption from the intel community, the Democrats, the establishment ones at least, and the media. That's been the greatest thing that Trump, that's why I voted for him. That's exactly what he's done. So it was bad enough that this media could actually swing elections. I mean, for God's sakes, we had this guy by the name of Robert Epstein testify in front of Congress that Google itself will be able to switch up to 15 million votes in the 2020 election for the Democrats. So it's bad enough that they could already swing elections in that way. But now there's a new threat. This is the second investigation that has grinded the Trump administration to a halt, that started at the behest of media sources being part of what was used to begin that investigation. So when we look at the FISA application into Carter Page, which was one of the big things that got the ball rolling into the Russia investigation and that 3-year debacle that was all a hoax, what did the FISA warrant do? Well, it cited Christopher Steele, paid opposition research that was never verified, was paid for by the DNC and Hillary's team, and it used Kremlin officials. To back that up, their only verification of that was, mainstream media outlets also verified that this information is true. And they cited Michael Isikoff from Yahoo News specifically. Well, then we later found out that Isikoff's source to prove that Christopher Steele was right was, drumroll please, Christopher Steele. That's called circularly, they're basically, they're each saying the same thing. Christopher Steele says, check out Michael Isikoff. And Michael Isikoff says, check out Christopher Steele. That's the two people that are backing up the story. So we don't have independent verification. We see the exact same thing going on now with this whistleblower complaint. The whistleblower complaint comes out and says, this is backed up by news sources I read. And then the news source takes the whistleblower complaint to show that their news stories were accurate. And I'm going to get to more if there's questions of exactly what was going on. Who was involved in this whistleblower complaint? Was Adam Schiff directly involved with writing it? Because we could see examples in the complaint, and I'll go through this whistleblower's complaint and show you that it doesn't look like something that an average CIA whistleblower would write. It looks like something more that lawyers designed to bring down Trump would write. So that's a huge problem. It's not just the media lying to me and you anymore. We know they're corrupt. We know they're liars. Even people that hate Trump don't trust the media. I mean, the numbers, even with people that dislike Trump, are below 50% for trust in the mainstream media. Yet we're using them, our intel agencies are using them as if they're trustable sources in order to grind the government to a halt, to start investigations. I mean, that's incredibly dangerous. Where are the people talking about this? I don't hear anyone talking about it. Now, I want to go through this article with Dan Bonacino because what we're talking about here is, I'm just going to get to the meat of it. I'm not going to go through the whole article. But they changed the rules right before, we don't know exactly when, but within a month of when this whistleblower came out. The chances of that just randomly happening are unbelievably low. Now, let's talk about what exactly happened. Used to have firsthand knowledge to be a whistleblower. All of a sudden, the intelligence community changes it to, nah, you can have secondhand knowledge if you want to. And then almost instantly, that's exactly what happens. A whistleblower with secondhand knowledge that didn't hear the Trump's call, who admits this is all hearsay, these are all just rumors that I heard from other people. He comes out with this complaint, and the Democrats use it immediately, and it basically grinds the Trump administration to a halt. Now they're saying it's worthy of impeachment. Keep in mind, we know, and I'll go through the actual whistleblower complaint, that there are many things in there that are actually false. And never forget that the Democrats wanted impeachment, over 200 of them, before they even read the transcript. So that proves to you, when they stand in front of the cameras and go, this isn't a political issue. This is about keeping our country safe and being constitutional and doing what the founding fathers would have. They actually suggested impeachment before they had any evidence, based on a guy that they knew was saying, well, I didn't actually hear the call, but I heard it was bad from other people. And they said, good enough for us, we'll impeach. So don't let them spin this lie that they're taking this serious, that it's not just a political gamesmanship. That's exactly what it is. So they changed this regulation, and then all of a sudden we have this secondhand whistleblower. So let's see how they did it. Going to the article here. Between May 2018 and August 2019, the intelligence community secretly eliminated a requirement that whistleblowers provide direct first-hand knowledge of alleged wrongdoings. The brand new version of the whistleblower complaint form, which was not made public until after the transcript of Trump's July 25th phone call with the Ukrainian president and the complaint addressed to Congress were made public, eliminates the first-hand knowledge requirement and allows employees to file whistleblower complaints even if they have zero direct knowledge of underlying evidence and only heard about wrongdoing from others. Now, there's a reason, and you've heard people on the media, like if you're watching Hannity or Tucker, you've heard right-wing people saying, like, or Rudy said this is hearsay, this couldn't be used in a court of law. Trey Gowdy said this as well. And that's absolutely true. It couldn't be used in a court of law. There's a reason that we don't allow hearsay in a court of law, because anyone could hear any kind of rumors. We, all the time, even if you think it's someone trustworthy, we see that reporters get stories wrong. People's memories of things get things wrong. So you can't use gossip as a reason to investigate or to impeach. That doesn't make you a whistleblower. And I'll get to exactly what this is going to lead to in the future. But let's go to exactly what it says. So here you can see the pictures. Pictured below is the prior form explaining that information must be firsthand. This might be a little small for you to read, but I'll read it to you. In order to find an urgent it says first-hand information required. This is what the restrictions used to be. This is what the qualifications for being a whistleblower used to be. In order to find an urgent concern credible, the ICIG must be in possession of reliable first-hand information. The ICIG cannot transmit information via the ICWPA based on an employee's second-hand knowledge of wrongdoing. This includes information received from another person, such as when a fellow employee informs you that he/she witnessed wrongdoing. Anyone with first-hand knowledge of allegations may file a disclosure writing directly with the IG. Similarly, speculations about the existence of wrongdoing does not provide sufficient legal basis to meet the statutory requirements of the ICWPA. In other words, the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Act. If you think that wrongdoing took place but can provide nothing more than secondhand assertions, the ICIG will not be able to process the complaint. Now that makes sense, because think of what now the new precedent will be. You remember when we had a left wing that was actually concerned about the intelligence agents? I was a big Ron Paul supporter. I'm 35 years old, so I came into college in 2002 as my first year in college, and I had all these left-wing friends, and we quickly all became against the Iraq war, and we found that the intelligence community was incredibly shady. They were part of this military-industrial complex. They wanted these regime change wars all throughout the country. The media went along with the Iraq war. Do you remember what happened after that? After the Iraq war, when people started to get upset, they started to say, Fox News is a joke. Fox News went along with the war, blah, blah, blah. To this day, they keep saying that, right, about Fox News. And all of the left-wing media said, we're sorry, we should have done our job better. We should have more thoroughly investigated the claims of George Bush and the intelligence community. And there was this massive distrust from the left of the intelligence community, which I shared as a Ron Paul supporter. Now that same intelligence community, or the same left-wing people are telling us, not only do we have to listen to the intelligence community, but they're telling us to even question them hurts America. That's what CNN said. Now they're cheering for a new system that says any unelected bureaucrat in the intelligence community could grind the country to a halt by saying, for merely politically partisan reasons, hey, I heard some gossip that I don't like what the president did. If the left thinks this won't be used against them in the future, if they ever get a candidate that would have the nerve to go up against the intelligence community, they're sorely mistaken. That's one of the ironies of seeing Tulsi Gabbard come out this week and say, first she was against impeachment, now she's for it. Hey, Tulsi, you're being smeared from the Democrats because you had the nerve to go against these wars. Remember, she went and tried to talk to Assad and was like, kind of had the same take that Donald Trump had during the debates, which is, look, Assad might be a bad dude, but why are we arming basically al-Nusra and al-Qaeda and ISIS to fight Assad? Weren't we all told that we had to have the Patriot Act? We had to violate our right to privacy because the threat of Islamic terrorism was so bad that we had to give up those Fourth Amendment rights? Yet at the same time, we're arming those same terrorists to fight other people? Tulsi didn't like that. Neither did Trump. That was one of the things I liked about Trump. So now Tulsi's like, oh, based on smears of the same intelligence community that smeared her, she says, yes, I do now support impeachment. So I wonder, I wouldn't want this, but karma would be, okay, well then why isn't Tulsi impeached? What if a whistleblower says, I heard of improper conversations between Tulsi Gabbard and Assad, so let's start impeachment proceedings against Tulsi Gabbard. And if you're a left-wing person that hates Trump, remember, Chuck Schumer told you specifically, he went on George Stephanopoulos' show in front of the entire country. I don't care if you despise Trump, if you hate his policies, if you hate him as a person. Every American's jaw should have hit the floor when one of the leaders of the two parties in this country got in front of national television and said, as an elected official, you cannot criticize the intel community. If you do, they'll find 6 ways from Sunday of getting back at you. That's not just Schumer saying that about Trump, mind you. That's Schumer letting you know that that's how he feels about himself, which means that no true Democrat would dare stand up against the intel community. Trump made a big mistake, Schumer's saying, oh, you can't go after the intel community. Now think of the implications of that. That means that me and yours vote. We could argue about issues. You could be pro-Second Amendment. You could be pro-illegal immigration. You could be pro-universal healthcare. Whatever your issue is, climate change, whatever your issue is, it doesn't matter. Because our elected officials have gone on national television and said, we can only do what the intelligence community allows us to do. So you better hope if your issue is climate change that the intelligence community is on board. You better hope if your issue is I want to stop disastrous foreign regime change wars that the intelligence community is on board with you. Spoiler alert, they're not. So all these progressives that were upset about the war in Iraq and George Bush was a warmonger, they're real quiet when Obama was there and he just continued the wars and started new ones, right? But now they're saying, not only are we cheering for the intel community's coup against Donald Trump because we hate Trump, but we're happy that they recently just changed the rules that says now an intelligence community person doesn't even need to see evidence to stop and lead to an impeachment investigation. All they need to do is say, I heard from some people that the president did something wrong. Do you really think that won't be used against any president, against any official, regardless of what the letter before their name is, Republican or Democrat? Of course that's what will be done. This is admitted. How can people be okay with this? Hearsay? Secondhand accounts? There's a reason that the law used to say, look, you need firsthand information. Because everybody knows that's what makes sense. You can't just take this on a rumor. Now you might say, I'm assuming you people listening to this wouldn't say this, but a devil's advocate or someone who hates Trump and wants to defend the intel community could say, but we could trust the intel community. They only act professionally. What a joke. How many people do I have to name? Strzok, Page, McCabe, Brennan, Clapper. I could go on and on. The leaks of Trump's phone calls to past leaders. The leaks that were designed, unmasking leaks designed to harm them. Right? All of these examples of the intel community being corrupt. And not just against Trump. Again, I'm a Trump supporter. I'm guessing most of the people watching this are Trump supporters, but I'm always trying to couch it in the terms of, even if you hate Trump, this is why you need to reject this corruption. Because the intel community's also gone after left-wing establishments that are left-wing politicians that weren't towing the establishment line as well. They don't want some anti-war person. They're not going to allow it. They've constantly dragged their feet for years and years and years when it comes to things like Freedom of Information Act requests or from congressional oversight into the FBI. They just thumb their nose at people. They don't allow any oversight. Those are the people we're now saying, now those unelected bureaucrats that me and you didn't vote for, people that have a stake in being lifetime Washington people, that have a stake in the military-industrial complex, who lie for a living. That's what the intelligence community is. Now we're saying, yep, they don't even need proof of wrongdoing to grind the government to a halt. All they have to do is say, I heard a rumor. And then all the government has to stop, and we have to see every document. If you think this is good because you hate Trump, imagine that this was the case under Obama, if you were a fan of his. All it took was one disgruntled person in the intel community to be like, I don't like Obama. So he files a whistleblower complaint that's like, hey, I was sitting around the water cooler and I heard Obama had some really shady conversations with the president of Iran about sending $1 billion in pallets of cash to them. Okay, release the phone calls. Let's see everything. Now, maybe you're for transparency, which I am for transparency. I talk about that all the time, right? But there needs to be, even I, as someone who's for government transparency, and I'm very cynical of what goes on in the government, even I understand the need for private conversations. Even I understand the need for some things to be kept undisclosed. A president talking to another foreign leader should be one of those things. You shouldn't be able to force the release of that based on, hey, I heard a rumor something bad was said in that conversation. Now, I've heard other people say this, but think about this really clearly for a second. Right? Let's look at the exact situation that happened instead of speaking in hypotheticals. Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, is having a conversation with Trump. One of the things he's talking about is being personally upset with Angela Merkel, right? The leader of Germany. Do you think that Zelensky wants his conversation basically saying, yeah, Merkel sucks, released to the public? How many times do you think world leaders talk and they might say something like this? This seems like a very reasonable conversation that could be had. Look, I understand you want us to sign this treaty or engage in this sort of policy, but understand, my voters aren't that bright. They're not looking at this as a priority, so I still have to throw them a bone and appease them. So yeah, we'll work with you to get what you want past the United States, but, I got to kind of capitulate to the people back in my country as well. They'll never be able to say that again. Why would you? If you were a foreign leader, if you're Zelensky, are you ever going to talk ill of Merkel again in a conversation with the president? Of course not. It's like me. I might come home and talk to my wife and grumble about work, right? These people at work. All of us do things like that. You don't want that conversation then being made public to all of your people at work. But that's exactly what we're seeing is happening. So the Democrats, by cheering for this and now saying, oh, all we need is rumors. That's all we need. If someone in the intel community hears a rumor, that's enough to grind the country to a halt. They are significantly impacting our ability to do diplomacy around the world through the executive branch. And there's no reason that this would just stop with the president. Why couldn't you say this about any elected official? I heard that ex-congressman had an improper phone call. Someone in the intel community doesn't like that congressman. They don't like their politics. Heck, remember what the IG himself said. And by the way, I just want to clear something up really quick. The IG is not Horowitz. So we have an inspector general that's looking into the case. They looked into the Hillary investigation. His name's Horowitz. He's now looking into FISA abuse and the Russia investigation. And he's the one who just released the information about Comey. This IG is a different IG. This inspector general is specifically related to the intelligence community. But his job is to investigate and make sure that there's not wrongdoing. And of course, there should be whistleblower protections. If you're a member of the intelligence community and you would directly see evidence of a crime going on, you should have a whistleblower protection. So you go and report this to your inspector general, and then they move forward with the case if they feel it's applicable to move forward with. So what Schiff and all the Democrats have been screaming about all week is that IG said that this complaint that he was given was serious enough to warrant an investigation. And so that's why you see Schiff saying, well, the director of national intelligence wouldn't leave the evidence come to Congress. This is abuse. This is obstruction of justice. That's what Schiff was yelling about in that committee meeting the other day. But it's a moot point. It's just like, I know I'm jumping around to here a little bit. Hear me out. Do you remember before Mueller's report came out? He gave the report to the Attorney General Barr. Barr summarized the report accurately, might I add. He said, here were the conclusions that basically were reached by Mueller. Mueller, because he's not someone who was interested in actually getting to the truth of an investigation, started to complain, I don't like the way the media is reporting Barr's summary of my report. Remember that? He sent a letter to Barr complaining he didn't like the media's coverage. Just as an aside, does that sound like a legitimate person? Does that sound like someone who's just interested in getting to the facts? He's complaining the way the media is talking about it? Ridiculous. Anyways, remember after that, the Democrats for like a month, the report got released 2 weeks later. Me and you could read it. The Democrats could read it. Everyone could read it. But the Democrats' complaint wasn't, well, this is what's said in the report. Their complaint was, we don't like the way Barr summarized it. Who cares? The report's in your hands now. So read it. If there's something in the report that you find damning about Trump, by all means, show us. Give us the page number. Give us the paragraph. But instead, they're like, no, we don't like the way Barr handled it. It's the same with this situation. They're saying, well, we don't like the fact that initially we didn't get this report the day we asked for it. We had to wait a week. But Trump took the unprecedented step of not only allowing the Director of National Intelligence to speak, of not only making the actual complaint public to Congress, but to the actual public, but he actually, for the first time I could ever think of, released a transcript of his call with a foreign leader. I can't think of one other president that's ever done that. So basically, their complaint of, oh, this is so corrupt, Trump's trying to hide this stuff. But he didn't. He released it. So even if it's like they had this playbook written and they were like, here's what our attack's going to be. And then Trump's like, yeah, whatever, release everything. And they're like, yeah, we're just going to stick to the playbook anyways. Oh, Trump won't release stuff. Yeah, but he did. Yeah, but he was hesitant to do it. Okay, but he did. And you see this in their argument. Oh, Trump put it in a more secure server. Can you believe that? Of course he did. Trump's the first president, again, I can think of, where people in the intel community were leaking the contents of his calls with foreign leaders to embarrass Trump, to hurt our national security. So of course, anytime he's having a serious conversation, he would put it in a more secure place. Now, the irony is, the Democrats, this is the Democrat position. The fact that Trump, even though all these intel community people have been leaking against him his entire administration, and have leaked conversations he's had with world leaders in the past, even though that's true, it's clearly corrupt for him to put these conversations in a more secure server. Even if he releases them later, that proves corruption. That proves we need to impeach. However, at the same time, Hillary Clinton taking information and removing it from government servers and putting it on unsecured private servers and then deleting the evidence, deleting that stuff, that's not corrupt at all. So the guy who's making it more secure and actually releases it for all of Congress and the public to see, that's corruption and trying to withhold evidence from people. But the lady that took it and put it on her private server and then deleted it so not even Congress who subpoenaed the evidence could get it, that's being transparent. Do you see what I mean when I was talking about my last video, how we're in the world of 1984? The truth is a lie, war is peace. The person being transparent is corrupt. The person deleting evidence so not even investigators could look at it is being transparent. That's the argument the Democrats are making to you right now. So that's how ridiculous this is. Now, before I go any further, I read you the portion that talks about how first-hand information used to be required. So now let's go to, here's the new version. 3, I know about the information I'm disclosing here and either 1, I have direct and personal knowledge, or 2, I heard it from others. Now, isn't it coincidentally that changed right around the time that this whistleblower was coming out? So there's all kinds of things, like if it's true that this conversation was so shady and that there was law-breaking going on, we know for a fact, as is admitted in the whistleblower complaint, that Trump did not treat this call any differently. As the President of the United States, excuse me, got a little heartburn today. But as the president of the United States, you're allowed to say, hey, this is a private conversation. I'm not going to clear the room. I just want me and my translator here. He could say that. He's well within his rights. You would assume if he's going to do something shady, that that's what he would do, right? He would say, clear the room. I'm about to, try to corruptly influence the 2020 election. But he didn't. He had the conversation. The whistleblower admits he heard that this conversation was as usual. So if all these dozens of people were in the room, why didn't anyone with direct knowledge of the phone call step up and say, hey, I think this is corrupt? Now, one other thing I want to say specifically, again, the timing is suspect. So think about this. The Democrats are making the argument. There is no quid pro quo. Read the transcript yourself. There's none. But the Democrats are making the argument. Well, the timing is suspect. The timing is what proves that Trump is guilty. And here's their argument. I'll try to do it as much justice as possible. Trump was about to give these Ukrainians aid. But then he withheld the aid right before his phone call with Zelensky, the president of the Ukraine. Therefore, when he then asked for help into investigations, which, by the way, it wasn't just into Biden, it was into 2016 election interference, as I'll get to later in my video. Which, that might sound familiar. Wait a minute, you mean a sitting president and his administration's going to foreign countries to get evidence of election interference? That might sound familiar to you because that's exactly what the Obama administration did that we had a 3-year investigation into Trump about. No one had a problem with that. But anyways, that's their argument. It's the timing that's suspect. So Trump doesn't literally say, hey, you're not going to get this aid unless you do this. He says, yeah, we've aided you in the past. The Ukrainians like, thanks, great, you're great. And Trump's like, yeah, we want your help though, because we think there was meddling into the 2016 election that came from Ukraine. You're right, says the president. We're looking into that, the president of Ukraine says. And he's like, yeah, and we heard that there was this great prosecutor over there that was looking into corruption, and he got fired because Joe Biden exerted pressure, and Biden bragged about it. That should be looked into. Yes, says the Ukrainian president. Nothing shady at all, as far as I'm concerned. But they're saying the timing, the fact that Trump withheld the aid, that's what proves his guilt. Now, clearly it doesn't, as I've talked about in other videos. But I want you to see the double standard here. On one hand, their argument is the timing proves corruption. But on the other hand, we know that the intelligence community just happened right before this whistleblower came out to completely do a 180-degree shift and go from only first-hand accounts because gossip's not good enough for a whistleblower to, nope, we'll gladly take gossip. You don't find that timing suspect? But we're supposed to believe, oh, it's just a coincidence. That's just a coincidence. Now, this is something that every person, again, I'm always trying to speak of. Most of the people I know in my life, they're not nerds like me. They actually have lives, and they're out there doing real stuff. I'm reading this stuff because I think it's important, and I happen to think I'm good at it, and I enjoy doing it. But I'm always trying to gear what I'm saying also to just the everyday person that's not looking into this. And so if you said to the everyday person, okay, listen to this. So, as you would expect, we can't basically impeach or throw someone in jail because someone says, hey, I heard secondhand information of this. They'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. You can't throw people in jail for gossip. Yeah. Now imagine that the investigative agencies were like, actually, we changed the rule. Now you can't throw people in jail or you can investigate them for gossip. Oh, and then 2 days later or a month later, that's exactly what happens. So the same group changed the rules, and then that group, someone in that group, the intel agency, uses that rule change almost immediately to stop a president. A president that, by the way, the other party's leader, Chuck Schumer, told us, oh man, you made a big mistake. You shouldn't have criticized the intel community. It makes no sense. The average person would be like, yeah, that looks incredibly shady. So they changed the rule, and then basically the next day, they used that rule to go after a guy that even that guy's opponent, Chuck Schumer, said that they were going to come after. Looks incredibly shady, doesn't it? Now, does that prove guilt? No, and that's always my contention. But what it proves is it meets the threshold for skepticism and for the need for an investigation. And we should have known this. We should have known that we shouldn't have grinded the government to a halt based on this shadiness that came about. Now, when I was talking about the IG, the Inspector General IG, he admits, the same guy that told said, I think this allegation's serious. That's who the Democrats are propping up. All the Inspector General IG. He was appointed by Trump. He thought this was a serious allegation. He's a great guy. That's what they're saying. That same IG said, by the way, this whistleblower looks like they're a partisan with an axe to grind. Like they don't like Trump's policies. So they just heard rumors. They don't like Trump. They hired a lawyer that hates Trump. A lawyer, by the way, that offered financial incentives for people to whistleblow against Trump. We know all this, right? So they didn't have direct knowledge. We now know that after we read the transcript that they were wrong about a lot of what they said. And we know that the intelligence community changed the rules right before this whistleblower came out to allow this sort of thing to happen. Because if this would have happened 3 months before that, the IG would have been forced to say, this is nothing. You're basically telling me you and some buddies were talking around the water cooler and you heard some gossip. What next? Are we going to have IG reports because one intel agency tells a rumor that someone's cheating on their wife? Oh, Inspector General report, whistleblower. That's the sort of gossip we're talking about that can now grind the country to a halt. And again, maybe you hate Trump and you say, I don't care, good, screw him. And by the way, I do follow people that I like on the left, such as Jimmy Dore, Aaron Maté. I think they're worth checking out. Jimmy Dore, if you check out his video on this whole Ukraine situation, I think he's wrong about a lot, but he's right on his central thesis. And at the end, he says, look, as someone who hates Trump, people come up to me and they say, but so what? Leave the intel community, take him down. And he's like, no, I don't want to trust these, dirty people in the intel community that are against everything I stand for just because they hate the same guy I do. If we're going to beat Trump, let's do it in an election. Yes, I respect that. Even though I disagree with a lot of his opinions on Trump, he is consistent, as is Aaron Maté. They've been shredding this Russia hoax from the get-go. Now it's the same with the Ukraine hoax. So all of that lined up, we see what's going on. And you won't hear this talked about in the media. They just ignore everything that paints this picture in a light that's not positive for them. And I'll get to more of that in the future. So it's important. Now, there's also more technical things where the document that actually showed that this whistleblower criteria changed were only uploaded for the public to see like 4 days after the whistleblower complaint came out. So the timing's very suspect. And when you know, again, and I hate to keep going back to this, but I was appalled. Like sometimes I feel like I'm a lone voice screaming. When Chuck Schumer said that, Look at where I came from where I was voting for Trump. And I bet a lot of you are in the same boat. I was tired of what I thought was corruption from the establishment in both sides. I feel like oftentimes real issues that concern real people like me and you aren't discussed. And that the politicians on both sides that really have the power, they agree on all the important issues. So, for example, they'll let us bicker and fight about abortion or gay rights, but when it comes to bailing out bankers, when it comes to foreign regime change wars that make them and all their friends rich, they always seem to agree. And that's why I like Trump, because he was an outsider to that. And I said, Trump, the biggest thing he could do is out that corruption from those politicians, the people in power, and their media allies. That's exactly what he's done. I was laughed at by a lot of people I know and that I think are friends with me. Laughed at. Well, y'all stop talking about the deep state. You sound like a crazy person. Strzok, Page, Comey, Brennan, Clapper. All of these leaks. All of the situation I've talked about already in this video. It's true. There is a deep state that's after Trump. Chuck Schumer came out and publicly admitted it. And when he said that, I'm looking around with my jaw on the floor like, did you hear that? The most powerful elected official in the United States, probably in the world, has to fear unelected bureaucrats if he disagrees with them. Because they'll take him down. Admitted by Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer's not carrying water for Trump, right? We know that. Yet no one seemed to speak up. So this isn't a far-fetched conspiracy theory as that's how the media is going to spin it. Oh, here we go. The tinfoil hat wearers. That's not a conspiracy theory. I showed you the proof. Okay. Now let's move on. The next thing I want to show you is there are problems with this whistleblower complaint because people are alleging it doesn't sound like an average CIA whistleblower would have written it. And I agree with that. It sounds very legalese. And it sounds like it's coming from a place of politics. In other words, it doesn't sound like someone who's concerned that there's an actual crime going on. It sounds like someone who's concerned about this message getting out to the public and affecting people for political reasons. And there's a difference. Hear me out. If you were truly concerned about a crime, you have to understand who your audience is. You're writing this document not so that CNN could see it, or George Stephanopoulos, or Anderson Cooper, or someone at the New York Times. You're writing it particularly for that IG, for the purposes of that IG then investigating whether or not these crimes occurred. So you wouldn't write it in a way as if your audience was someone else, was the public, or was a journalist. But this whistleblower complaint seems to be written in that way. For example, and what I'm going to really focus on, that I haven't heard anyone else discuss, there is a lengthy section where the whistleblower is going out of his or her way to say, by the way, this is unclassified. I just want to say it's unclassified. And if you say it's classified later, then you should have to prove that it should have been classified. Well, now, why would they go on about this? If this document was just designed to go to the Inspector General is allowed to see this information regardless if it's classified or not. So why are you going out of your way to say this document is unclassified? It's almost as if your intent was for this document to make it to the public or to make it to other people that wouldn't otherwise have access to it. So then the question becomes, okay, if it sounds like it's legalese, and it sounds like not just one CIA person wrote this, and it sounds like they were writing it with the intent of it being made public, or at least being made to be given to people that otherwise wouldn't have been allowed to see it, who else saw it then? Was there other people involved with writing it? And so that brings us to this story, which you may have heard about. Adam Schiff, right around the time that this report came out. Now, Schiff claims he just got the report right before it was released, and how dare this be hidden for so long? But it turns out that Schiff is publicly tweeting things that are almost direct allegations from the whistleblower complaint. So, this is from August 28, 2019. Adam Schiff tweets, Trump is withholding vital military aid to Ukraine while his personal lawyer seeks help from the Ukraine government to investigate his political opponent. It doesn't take a stable genius to see the magnitude of this conflict or how destructive it is to national security. And Paul Sperry says, wait a minute, check this out. Schiff tweeted this exact same Trump-Ukraine collusion narrative a month ago. Exactly how long has Schiff and the Dems been working with this whistleblower? And this does raise serious questions. Because if this person was just a legitimate whistleblower, they had no reason, none at all, to work with any politician, period. They should have had no contact with them. They should not have been out there giving evidence to politicians or media people, any of that stuff. They go through the proper channels. They give it to the IG, and then the IG deals with it. Now, if the IG would have buried this story possibly, then maybe you could give justification for them reaching out elsewhere. But the IG didn't bury it. So what did Schiff know, and when did he know it? Is this proof that Schiff was working with the whistleblower? No. But certainly Schiff, whose offices have been purported to be the center of almost most of the leaks that are coming out of the Russia investigation, Schiff, the same person that said that trying to get dirt on an opponent from foreigners is illegal and means you should be removed from office, yet at the same time you could go online and find the public call where he was prank called by Russians who he thought were giving him nude photos of Donald Trump. So in other words, Schiff attempted to do the very thing he said warranted removing Trump from office. And he's clearly a liar. He lied for how many, 2 years now? He lied, said, I've seen the evidence that proves that Trump and his team conspired illegally with the Russians. So it's not beyond Schiff. Schiff should lose his security clearance immediately because of all these conflicts of interest and the fact that he's proved himself. How about this parody that he just did, right? Where he knows that he's about to give a clip. And I'm assuming you all know about this parody, but it was at the committee meeting with the DNI. And what he did was he pretends he's reading from the transcript of what Trump actually said, but then he adds all kinds of incriminating dirt that just wasn't said. Like he says, I'm only going to tell you 10 times, you make up the dirt on Biden or we're not going to give you this aid. And none of that was true. He just made it all up. And when he's called out, he says, oh, it was a parody. Well, it's not that simple because if you look at Schiff's tweets since then, he's still tweeting lies. Like, he put out a big Twitter post yesterday, and the first thing he said was, we know the whistleblower was telling the truth because, one, Trump said, make up dirt on Biden. He never said that. That's a lie. So the idea that Schiff was just telling a parody as a joke, it makes no sense anyways, because he's the one and his side are the ones that are saying this is grave implications. This is the most serious thing. Then why are you taking the time to joke? The reason he did that is because he knows the kind of culture we live in, and he knows the media are his allies. And so if he just gives bulletin headline material, people will hear that. And then your friends, the average people, people out there that are Democrats that hate Trump, they just hear that soundbite that Schiff said and said, oh my God, can you believe Trump? Yeah, and that's the type of stuff that happens. So Schiff is just, we know he should lose his clearance for this stuff as far as I'm concerned. But again, it's not definitive proof, but it's worth questioning. We have ground, just remember these two facts. When you say, well, what does that mean? Question, well, that doesn't mean anything. This needs to be taken serious. Number one, remember, all of these Democrats, over 200 of them, voted for impeachment before they even read the transcript. And they knew the transcript was coming out the next day. Remember, Donald Trump comes out at 2 o'clock and says, I'm releasing the transcript tomorrow. 3 hours later at 5 o'clock, Pelosi comes out and says, yeah, I'm now for an impeachment inquiry. She could have said, even though we know, because it belies them, and we know that they were going to vote for impeachment no matter what, right? And this was what I said from the get-go. This was the Democrats' argument. We at the Democrats are absolutely furious. We cannot believe the crime that Donald Trump has committed. The crime of whatever it says in the transcript. Oh my goodness. Can you believe whatever it says in the transcript? They were just it didn't matter what it said. Trump could have specifically said, hey, by the way, Zelensky, don't bother looking into Joe Biden and his son. That ship has sailed. Let's move on. And they would have said, oh, that was a dog whistle to look into Joe Biden's son. So we're still for impeachment. It didn't matter what it said. That's why they voted for it before they read it. So when we know that, and then we see all the shady stuff that I've already talked about behind it, it starts to be that if you were objective, you would say, wow, this is really shady and needs investigated. But instead, it'll be covered up. So let me go through the whistleblower complaint and show some of the stuff that was inaccurate in it and show you exactly what I'm talking about, as if it seems very suspicious that this was being written for public consumption. Why is that important? Let me just real quickly, because I don't know if I made this point clear enough. If this was being written for public consumption, that proves that the whistleblower's intent was not to make sure that crimes weren't being committed, but it was to influence public opinion, which means that the complaint itself is political in nature. Let me read this question real time. Why isn't the Senate doing anything? Yeah, that's a great question, right? And you hear Mark Levin talk about this. I make the same accusations. I think the reason is there are a lot of Republicans in the Senate that truthfully are kind of never Trumpers. I think that there's kind of this agreement that goes on with the Republicans and Democrats. Like I was saying, that the establishment at level of them both kind of agree with the important things, the big issues. But I also think there's an agreement amongst them that they never want to out corruption on the other side because there's so much dirt to go around. If we bring down Hillary Clinton, then they'll bring down Jeb Bush, etc. So you're like, look, we just don't want to talk about it. How else can you explain the fact that this slush fund to pay sexual assault accusers hasn't been outed by someone? It's almost like they know, we don't want to start outing people because then people will look into me and my potential crimes. And so the Republicans, right, seem to be reticent to do anything like that. I also think there's part of the Republicans think we'll play the game fairly and we'll play the game how we'd want to be played against us. And they don't realize the Democrats don't care. The Democrats are going to be corrupt. And yeah, you are right, Ecoms, that they are putting their faith in Barr. But again, one of the excuses I heard from Barr, for example, the Inspector General report on Barr specifically referred to him to the Attorney General for criminal prosecution. That was said, and you could go back and look at my videos. They're damning. It outlines at least 3 crimes that Comey committed: mishandling classified information, giving that classified information to friends, and lying to Congress. It makes that case clearly, all 3 of them. All 3 are reasons to prosecute, but Barr didn't. And I think if you listen to Joe Genova, who I'm a big fan of, but he aggravates me to no sense because Tom Fitton comes out on Hannity and is like, oh my goodness, this is a huge mistake by Barr. Barr should have prosecuted Comey. DeGenova's on that same show and says, no, he shouldn't have. And DeGenova said publicly that he doesn't think there'll be many prosecutions. It's all about outing the dirt and then leave the American people decide through the course of an election. But the problem is, the Republicans are losing the narrative in many ways. Now, people like us are doing our part to get past that. But again, like I explained, the Democrats control the narrative because they control all these institutions of power. And so this is wordy and it sounds confusing. Let me just put it to you like this. The report on Comey was damning. Can you think of a report that's more shameful to the FBI or to this country? That it says, I'm referring Comey for criminal prosecution, and he demolished FBI protocol and set a bad precedent for the entire organization. What he did was shameful. Barr declines to prosecute, and that story became a victory for Comey. What did Comey tweet that day? He was bragging. He's still bragging to this day. He's claiming he was vindicated. That's how the media was spinning it. It's a little shady, but yeah, Comey didn't commit any crimes. So if you think that outing this corruption to the people is going to be enough, the media is just going to spin it. Look at how shady they are with this situation. They lie. They ignore things. They spin it. And the average person that's not like me or you that has time on a Saturday to be looking into this stuff, you know, they're working or they're out with friends and family or they're playing softball, whatever. They're at the bar, maybe. All they know is what, you know, heck, they're fed up with the media. They don't even trust them. It's like, I just want to laugh tonight. You know what? I'll put on one of the late night shows. Oh, there's Stephen Colbert. Oh, there's Seth Meyers. Oh, there's every single late night person that hates Trump spinning the exact same garbage that the media spins. So the entertainment industry's corrupt. Well, maybe I'll go online. Silicon Valley's corrupt. They're censoring people that are trying to tell the truth. You know? Well, what are the professors saying? What are the intelligent people saying? They're lying. They're all with the establishment left. So the Republicans in the Senate need to start criminally prosecuting people, start to issuing subpoenas, or this will never change. If we get through 4 or 8 years of Trump and none of these people are brought to justice, nothing will change at all. So that's kind of my spiel, is why I think that the Senate Republicans aren't doing anything. Now, hopefully I'm wrong, and hopefully Barr starts to prosecute people. Supposedly he's in Italy right now, and that could have a lot to do with Joseph Maguire, which if you guys like, I could talk about that at the end of my video. But I'm going to go on with the whistleblower complaint right now. And real quickly say, yes, Barr could still charge Comey in the future, or he could charge him with FISA abuses. But the problem is that they should have charged him for when the evidence of these crimes were made public. Because now, even if he charges him with FISA and he doesn't charge him with this, the precedent's been set that the media, that the intel community can with impunity leak anything they want to the press to damage a president. That is a terrible precedent to set. And if he charges him later, then the Democrats and Comey's story will be, oh, this is political, because when this evidence first came out, they declined to prosecute. So this proves that it's now just political. And don't be mistaken. 50% of what this Ukraine impeachment garbage is about is that the Democrats know the IG report's coming out. And so they know that not only is this an effective distraction, but if you're not really careful and if you're not really thinking it through, a lot of the arguments that Trump defenders are making about his conversation with the Ukrainian president are going to be used to defend Obama's administration and people like James Comey. So I know I'm getting sidetracked here, but this is important, and I haven't heard anyone say this. Your gut reaction, if it's the same as mine, when you see Trump and Zelensky's conversation is, I don't have a problem with him asking about investigating corruption, including investigations into Joe Biden. Similarly, you remember the Democratic letter, and I talked about this in my last live stream, which please, I encourage you all to go watch. It's 2 hours and 40 minutes. But what I try to do is, a lot of these live streams, I'm trying to really look at things in a detailed way instead of a lot of people's YouTube shows, or particularly, and it's not because they're bad, they're fantastic. Many of these people were far more talented than me. But they're not as good looking, I don't think. So that's the one thing I have on them. But particularly when you're talking like media shows like Hannity or Tucker, they got like 4-minute segments to get this information out there. So I'm trying to really go in depth with it. It's what I'm trying to do. But what I show is, I show that letter that those 3 Democratic senators sent. I don't think that's a crime either. It might be shady, but I don't mind people in a political party contacting foreign governments and saying, hey, we've heard allegations that our opponents broke the law. If you have any information on this, can you give it to us? I don't mind that. But the difference is, that's what the Democrats will say. Oh, you said you didn't mind Trump doing that, so now you don't get to complain when the Obama administration did that. There's a huge difference. The difference is this. What you do with that evidence is what makes the potential crime. So Obama had every right, as far as I'm concerned, to go to the UK or to go to Australia or to even go to Kremlin officials and say, hey, do you have dirt on Donald Trump possibly breaking the law to influence this election? What the Obama administration did that was illegal and improper was then not verifying that dirt and using it to spy on people connected to the Trump campaign. That is the biggest political scandal in the history of our country. The weaponization of the most powerful investigative and intelligence agency in the history of the world that could turn your life upside down. Remember, the Watergate scandal was that 3 bumbling people went through a hotel looking for dirt and looking for information on their opponent's campaign. Imagine instead of 3 bumbling people that Nixon used the entire FBI to wiretap, to spy, to get this information, and then leaked it out to the public. That's what we're talking about. It's of a magnitude so far greater than Watergate that it boggles the mind. So that's what's going on. So don't leave people conflate when this comes out. Mark my words. Mark my words, you're going to see the Democrats say, oh, just 2 weeks ago, the Trump supporters were saying it's okay to talk to foreign agencies and try to find out if crimes were committed. So what's the big deal? What's the big deal with what Comey did and with what Obama did? But it's vastly different. So don't fall into that trap. Okay, now, and again, I don't hear anyone talking about this. You have to think stages ahead. There's this big information war going on. You have to think and look, you might, on one hand, the Democrats happen to be the most bumbling, least effective political people I've ever seen. So they constantly shoot themselves in the foot. Trump will say something that it looks like it could be a victory for the Democrats, and then they'll take that and they'll run so crazy with it that it ends up hurting the Democrats. Like, let me give you a quick example. You remember when Trump's watching Fox News one night and he sees Ari Horowitz come out and he gives this report on increased terror attacks from Islamic extremists in Sweden. So Trump tweets out the next morning, did you see that terror attack in Sweden last night? Well, there was no attack. So that's all the media had to say was, Trump was wrong, there was no attack last night. But instead, the media and the Dems say, Trump was wrong, there was no attack last night. And actually, Sweden's the best place ever, and there are no attacks ever. Then which the Trump team can come back and be like, well, that's clearly not true. Look at all these facts. So it's just an example of the Democrats and the media being so stupid. But on the other hand, they are intelligent political operatives. Say what you will, they have effectively stymied and controlled the narrative around Trump's presidency for 3 years now. So it's time to start fighting back. And you have to understand that these people are smart and that they did this, it was time for a reason. The fact that the whistleblower law changed exactly when it did. The fact that this whistleblower with just now all of a sudden secondhand gossip's allowed comes out exactly at the time that that law changed, that the intelligence people changed it. And that's coming out all right after the Mueller report, right? Because that was kind of it, right? It was like, okay, the Democrats are going to give their big punch. It's the Mueller report. It was going to take Trump down and total dud. And now it's like, okay, here comes the counterpunch. This IG report's going to show so much corruption. And the Democrats smartly are like, no, we have to defend against this punch that's coming. So they smartly go on the offense, which is something Republicans need to do more. All right, so sorry, I got a little distracted. This whistleblower, and I won't go through the whole thing, but I'm going to go through some of the stuff that I want to talk about. So here's the start. I'm reporting an urgent concern. The letter is unclassified. Notice it's big bold, right? Capital letters, when separated from the attachment. In the course of my official duties, I received info from people about the 2020 election. The info concludes, among other things, pressuring a foreign country to investigate one of the main domestic political rivals. Giuliani's involved. And then he goes on to say, over the past 4 years, blah, blah, blah. I'm deeply concerned that the actions described below constitute a serious or flagrant problem, abuse, or violation of law or executive order, and that does not include differences of opinions concerning public policy matters consistent with an urgent concern in 50 U.S.C. Now, notice how that looks like very much legalese. He's using the specific terms. This matters, too, because think about it this way. Remember, what got Hillary Clinton out of trouble? Why was Comey allowed to not prosecute her? Because they were using specific language within the law to say, because remember, the official notice that was first written by Comey said that she, what was the word that it used? It said that she, oh man, I'm drawing a blank. But it used a specific term that's actually in the law. Gross negligence, I think it said. And so Comey, that was his first memo on this. Then when he realized, oh crap, that's the wording of the law. I can't use that. Because if I say she committed gross negligence and the law says gross negligence is prosecutable, people will demand I prosecute her. So I got to change the language. That's why this sort of stuff's important. And this is what corrupt bureaucrats use all the time to get out of trouble. They find kind of this legalese. They go through these specific terms and try to argue that this proves that someone's guilty or someone's innocent. So it seems very odd. If the CIA is just concerned about a potential, some potential crime occurring, basically his argument would be like, I think Trump's improperly using his office to threaten people to benefit him politically. But the fact that he's using this specific language seems as if he went to some sort of lawyer. We need to investigate and see where they came from. He says, I'm fulfilling my duties to report this. I'm also concerned these actions pose a risk to U.S. security and the government's effort to deter and counter foreign interference in U.S. elections. That's ironic, because the fact that this whistleblower, or as I call them, this hearsayer, is allowed to use gossip to out conversations between the president and foreign leaders does more to damage, how's he put it, foreign interference and deter our efforts to secure U.S. elections. Now, this is the part that I want to talk about specifically. To the best of my knowledge, the entirety of this statement is unclassified when separated from the classified enclosure. I've endeavored to apply the classification standards outlined in an EO 13526 and to separate out information that I know or have reason to believe is classified. If classification marking is applied retroactively, I believe it's incumbent upon the classifying authority to explain why such a marking was applied and to which specific information it pertains. Why would he be going out, or she, because we don't know, why would this hearsayer be going out of their way to say this is unclassified? Remember, what are these documents normally doing? Who is the audience for this document? The audience for this document is someone with a security clearance that's allowed to see classified information, that's going to make a judgment as to whether or not to start an investigation. That's the IG. So why is he 3 times now? And then if you also look, I'll go back here for a second. Notice that it says at the top and bottom of every page, unclassified, unclassified. So he's going out of his way to say over and over again, this isn't classified. I'm allowed to share this with people. This information's allowed to be out there. Now, doesn't that put the fact that we then see, let's go back here, that at the same time that this was being created, Adam Schiff's saying language that's almost directly from the whistleblower complaint. It's almost as if he's setting up a defense, because if it turns out that we find out that people before the IG got this report saw it, that it wasn't a crime. Right? So picture this scenario happens. This whistleblower is working with lawyers or is working with someone connected to the Democratic Party and is showing this information. Later, we find out about that. All of a sudden, that's a crime. You can't give classified information to Peter Schiff or to other people or to lawyers or whatever. So he's saying, no, it's unclassified, it's unclassified, it's unclassified. This reeks of the intent was for other people to see it. And you're right, the leaker doesn't get to determine what's classified or not. But the fact that he's making the legal defense publicly and acknowledging, right? And then remember, you want to talk about bad precedent? Why was Comey allowed to get away with what he did? Because they said, Barr was like, it's difficult to prove the intent that Comey thought this material was classified. In other words, Comey was saying, I thought these were my personal memos. I didn't think it was classified material. So now, anytime someone's going to leak to harm the president, all they have to do is publicly acknowledge, hey, I don't think this is classified, so it's totally cool for me to give this to other people, because personally, I don't feel it's classified. And then even if retroactively people say, actually, that was classified, they say, oh, okay, my bad, I thought it was unclassified. And we've set the precedent, okay, we don't charge those people. This was clearly written by someone with the intent of other people viewing it. Rather that's other people viewing it before the IG, like Schiff, who would then, because think about it. This is a tough sell. This is tough to sell to the American people, that based on gossip, we need to have an impeachment of the president. So you need to be selling it on all fronts. You need the Democrats to be talking about it. You need the media to be talking about it. And so in order for that to happen, in order for this pressure to be being applied in August 28, when Schiff's making these comments, you need these allegations to be out there. Trump's corrupt, Trump's corrupt, Trump's corrupt, Ukraine, this would be a big deal. Oh, wait, but there's a whistleblower report? Oh, that impeach, we got to make him. Remember, they wanted to impeach before they read the transcript. So it's clear that this whistleblower was writing with the intent of this information getting to either people before the IG or to be made public to persuade the actual public that Trump's a dirty, dirty person, so we should vote him out. Remember, Al Green said, Democrat Al Green said, he said, we have to impeach Trump because we're afraid if we don't, he'll win the 2020 election. This whistleblower seems to be going right in line with that. I need other people to see this information because even if it doesn't result in an impeachment, I need people to see this. And then I know that my media friends will say, oh, this super serious, great objective person in the intel community, they said that Trump's guilty. That's all we need. Never mind that had no firsthand knowledge. Never mind that a lot of the accusations in his complaint were wrong. Never mind that the intelligence community just so happened to change the rules right before this whistleblower came out to say that gossip's fine. Despite all that, that's important that they had to control the narrative. And I haven't heard anyone talk about this. Now, I'm not going to go through this whole thing because I think most people have gone through this whistleblower complaint, but I do want to go through just the beginning of it and show just what I mean. It's bad enough that this is all based on gossip, as this person admits. It's bad enough that the intelligence community just changed their rules to allow gossip to apply to whistleblower status before this. But remember, when we read this whistleblower complaint, we actually know more than the whistleblower because we've read the transcript of the phone call. The whistleblower admits he didn't have access to the phone call when he writes this complaint, or she. And yeah, I think you're right. There's probably a good chance Schiff at least helped write it. It needs to be investigated for sure. Anyways, so not only do we know everything I just said, but now we know retroactively that actually a lot of what was alleged in this complaint just isn't true. But none of that matters. The idea was to get this stuff out there because they knew the media would spin this as Trump's an evil person that's trying to destroy the country for selfish reasons. They knew it. So it was by hook or crook, by any means necessary, get this accusation out there. That's all that matters. The accusation is all that matters. So if we later find out, geez, the accusation made 10 claims and 9 of them were wrong, doesn't matter. It was already out there and that was reason to start the impeachment. So when I go through real quick here and show some of the things that were wrong about this, it's secondhand information that was gossip that was wrong. Doesn't matter. The media still acts, this person's a hero. Says, Trump called July 25th, called the president. Multiple White House officials with direct knowledge of the call informed me after an initial exchange of pleasantries, the president used the remainder of call to advance his personal interests. Wrong. That's a lie. First off, after the initial exchange of pleasantry, the first thing Trump says is, can you give us information about 2016 election interference from the Ukraine? That is not of personal benefit. If that's something of personal interest, then the entire Obama administration's investigation into possible Russia collusion was also of the Democrats' personal interest. So right out of the gate, the first claim they make is a lie. Secondly, even after this, if you want to get really technical, for 2 paragraphs, basically Trump says, can you help us with this? Ukraine says, yes, it looks like corruption. Trump says, yeah, and also with this. Ukrainian guy goes, yeah, that's corruption. Then they proceed to have 2 more pages of dialogue about, oh, I love, I have friends that are in the Ukraine, blah, blah, blah. So he's lying when it says the whole call was just about trying to get things of personal interest. That's a lie, right out of the gate, okay? Namely, he sought to pressure Ukrainian leader to take actions to help the president's 2020 election bid. That's a lie. Show me where he even mentions the 2020 election. Now, the Democrats will say, well, it was implied. Go back and watch my live stream from yesterday. It started about 14 minutes in, where I talk about how this CNN article that's defending the 3 Democratic senators that sent a letter in May of 2018 basically said, hey, Ukraine, we're happy that things are going good. And as Democrats, we've been happy to support your economic growth and your militaristic growth. But we're really concerned because we heard that you're going to stop giving evidence to Mueller's investigation into Donald Trump. We strongly recommend you reverse course. That's exactly what they're accusing Trump of doing. The CNN article says, oh, Trump's wrong to say that was somehow improper because they don't actually make a threat. They don't actually say they're doing this for personal reasons. Well, it's the same here. It's clearly a double standard. He says, they asked to initiate an investigation into the activities of former President Joseph Biden and his son Hunter Biden. Initiate or continue. That's important because one of the defenses that's given with these Democrat senators' letters is, oh, they weren't asking for an investigation to start. They were asking for an investigation to continue. So why didn't this whistleblower presumably was in the CIA when that was going on in May of 2018? Why no whistleblowing there? Oh, it was okay when the Democrats did it. What this whistleblower and the Democrats would have us believe is it is proper for the Democrats to go out and seek foreign help to prove crimes that Donald Trump may have committed involving election interference. But it is not only improper for Trump to try to find crimes that Democrats possibly committed, but it's actually reason for impeachment. So in other words, you can't investigate Democratic crimes. That's their argument. They also say to assist in purportedly uncovering allegations of Russian interference in the 2016 election originated in Ukraine, with a specific request the Ukrainian leader locate and turn over servers used by the DNC. That's a lie. Trump never asked to turn over servers. He mentions the server. He says there's problems with CrowdStrike and they're shady and they might be based in Ukraine, so can you look into it? He never says, can you hand over the server? Lie number 2. Meet and speak with Barr and Giuliani. Yeah, he said that. So what? The president also praised Ukraine's special prosecutor general, Mr. Yuri Leshchenko, and suggested that Zelensky might want to keep him in his position. That's a lie. Go through the transcript. He never mentions Leshchenko. He says it's a shame that the former prosecutor got fired. He's talking about Shokin, the one that Biden got fired. That was the predecessor of Leshchenko. He also never says that someone shouldn't be fired or should be kept by Zelensky, the Ukrainian president. Never mentions it once. In fact, Zelensky goes on to say, yeah, I'm actually bringing in my own people that I could really trust, and they're going to be a great friend to you, Mr. Trump. Nowhere does Trump say that's a mistake. You should have kept the former prosecutor. I encourage you to rehire that person. That's a lie. So already we see 3 lies. The other lie I want to, and there's more in here, but the one I want to talk about specifically, it says, in addition to White House personnel, I was told that State Department official Mr. T. Ehrlich Breckbull also listened in on the call. That's a lie. Breckbulls came out and publicly said, I was not there. I did not hear this call. So we know that this whistleblower lied over and over again. So they didn't have firsthand knowledge. They're just repeating gossip. We know most of that gossip's untrue, and we're supposed to ignore all of this. The transcript's damning. I mean, it just defies belief. It's ridiculous. So, the other thing, and that's basically what I have on this whistleblower complaint, but it shows that they're lying, that there's all sorts of shady things. And the other thing I want to mention about this is, remember, the media doesn't talk about this. They're so disgusting. What they do, it's transparent what they do. It's just like if you're having an argument with someone on Twitter or some website, and you're discussing these issues, you make a really good point when the other side just ignores you. They don't address it. That's what we're seeing when we're talking about the whistleblower rules changing, right? When we're talking about Adam Schiff tweeting this stuff, when we're talking about these lies from the whistleblower themselves, they're just not talking about it. If enough of us raise a stink where it gets to the point where it's now in the public conversation, then they'll respond. And their response will be collective. They'll all respond at the same time. Bam, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, PolitiFact. All of these establishment left-wing mainstream media places will bam, 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 bam. They'll put out like the same argument in the same articles over and over again. One of these days I'm going to do a live stream just completely on the corruption that we see of the articles that are put out and how much lies they are. Let me look something up real quick. This was from the video I did last night. But I just want to show you, just real quick, and please, I encourage you. Again, I know I sound whiny. And look, as I said in my live stream yesterday, I could sit here and pretend to you, I'm just noble. I just want this information out there. No, I'm also selfish. I would like to be able to do this on a more constant basis. Currently, right now, I'm working 70 hours a week. I'm trying my best to help the Republicans in Pennsylvania. I ran for Congress in Pennsylvania, unsuccessfully, in case you were wondering. And so there is a selfish part to me that wants my information to get out there and shared because I like doing this and I want people to hear me. But more importantly than that, I just want the information out there. So please, I encourage you to share like and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have it, and like and subscribe to my Twitter. And please share this information because I don't see people discussing this stuff. Like if you heard anyone talking about the classification, the fact that this whistleblower is out there saying it has to be unclassified, So real quick, let's talk about this. Yeah, you're right. They use the same, all these media places use the same arguments and specific words and phrases. The walls are closing in. 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 Tucker does a good job of exposing this. Climate change is an existential threat. It's an existential threat. Existential threat. All the Democrat politicians in the media parrot the same phrases. So just real quick to go through what I'm talking about. Remember, we're talking about the allegation that these 3 Democratic senators sent this letter in May of 2018. 2 things to remember that are absolutely damning about this. 1, it almost directly mirrors the situation that they're accusing Trump of being criminal and needing to be impeached for. Just like, and I repeat this over and over, and it's worth repeating. In fact, I have an open challenge to any of you, other than annulments. Name me one crime that Trump's been accused of or anyone in his orbit has been accused of, and I could show you the Democrats or the intel community, someone in them committing that exact same crime in the exact same time frame, only worse or more obviously. Every single thing. FARA violations, lying to the FBI, obstruction of justice. It doesn't matter. Come up with one. I would be happy to debate anyone saying this. They always accuse Trump of what they themselves are doing. So these Democratic senators, just in a more obvious way, did exactly what they're accusing Trump of. Said, hey, nice economy you have there. We've supported it. We think it's a huge mistake if you're not going to continue to give us dirt on Donald Trump. CNN says, fact check. Trump falsely claims Democrats' letter made threat to Ukraine. That's wrong. If it's false that they claim that, then it's also, I could say, fact check. CNN falsely claims that Trump's transcript to President of Ukraine claims he made threat. That's what CNN's saying. That's what the Democrats are saying, and it clearly didn't. So it's clear they're so shady. If you line these situations side by side, you can see the double standard is amazing. And it's not just that this improperly influences people and can control the public discourse, but like I said at the beginning of this, places like CNN are now being cited by intelligence community officials as reasons to investigate Trump and grind the government to a halt. So pointing out their corruption is crucial. Let's just go through it real quick. Under fire for asking Ukrainian President Zelensky to investigate opponent Joe Biden, Trump argued at a Wednesday press conference the senators were actually guilty parties, these Democrats. Trump spoke of a letter that 3 Democrats wrote in 2018 to Ukraine's prosecutor general, claiming in the letter they implied that their support for U.S. assistance to Ukraine was at stake if they didn't do the right thing and wouldn't get assistance. Gee, doesn't that sound familiar? He accused Chris Murphy. I'm going to skip that part because I'm just talking about the letter. Later in the press conference, Trump said, I told you about senators that threatened him with votes and no money to come to Ukraine if they do things. That's really what people are saying I did. The only difference is I didn't do it. There was no quid pro quo. But there was with Biden, there was with these senators. And they threatened, they said, you do this, you do that, we're not going to give you the votes. That's the real deal. We fact check this. Let's start with the letter. It says, a request, not a threat. Facts first. The 2018 letter from Senators Leahy, Durbin, and Menendez did not include any threat at all about U.S. assistance to Ukraine or anything else. It did not even mention U.S. assistance. Now, let's just change some names real quick. The 2019 call between Trump and President Zelensky did not include any threat at all about U.S. assistance to Ukraine or anything else. In fact, it did not even mention U.S. assistance. The exact same defense that CNN's giving Trump's defense. Trump saying, I didn't mention assistance. I didn't make any threat. CNN and the Democrats are saying, yes, you did. It was implied. But when it comes to these Democrats who did the exact same thing, they're saying, oh, no, that's wrong to say that. Rather, it expressed concern about a New York Times article that said Ukraine had, with the aim of avoiding Trump's anger, stopped cooperating with Robert Mueller and frozen investigations into Paul Manafort, Trump's former campaign man. Now remember, 2 things to remember about this section. 1, we know that there was actually illegal election interference bragged about by a man named Leshchenko. Leshchenko was working out of the Ukrainian office, and he admits in a Financial Times article from 2017, I believe, it might have even been before the election, that he had this black ledger of possible investigations into the crimes of Paul Manafort. It was like handwritten notes of his. He gave that dirt to the DNC, particularly a woman named Alexandra Chalupa. She then takes that dirt and leaks it to the press. None of the information in that ledger had been proven at the time. Still, much of it hasn't been proven. Despite that, when the press reports came out, Trump was smeared by the press and was forced to let Manafort go as his campaign manager. In other words, remember, the entire accusation of Trump was he got dirt on Russians from Hillary. At the Trump Tower meeting, Don Jr. was trying to get dirt on Hillary and spread it. We know for a fact it was admitted. Leshchenko admits, yes, I did that. I gave this evidence to the Democrats because I felt that Trump was too pro-Russian and I wanted him out of there. I wanted to affect the election. That's admitted by a Ukrainian official. Reported in the U.S. media. Never breathed a word about, though, by the Democrats. Go look at Adam Schiff. And again, like we were talking about how they all repeat the same talking points. Go to Twitter and look at Kamala Harris or Adam Schiff or all of these people today. And they're saying, the big news story is, go to Drudge. It says, Trump said in a 2017 call with Putin that he wasn't that concerned about Russian election interference. Okay, who cares if he said that? Did Trump say it's illegal to investigate Russian election interference? No. The investigation did occur. But if we're concerned about election interference, name me one Democrat that's concerned about the public acknowledgement of DNC officials working with Ukrainian officials to interfere in the 2016 election. Not only are they not discussing this, they're saying it's criminal for Trump to even seek evidence into this. So if Adam Schiff says that it's against our country that Trump wasn't concerned about election interference and he said that in a call, he says Trump's not a patriot, what does that make Adam Schiff? Who's saying not only am I not concerned about election interference that benefited us, that's publicly acknowledged. It's not just made up crap like they said about Trump and Russia. But I think it's a crime if you try to investigate it. But do you know what I mean? Like, one of the things, I hate people that are hypocrites. And so if you take X actions, that means you're a terrible person. And I say, okay, you clearly are taking X action. And they say, oh, that's okay, I'm allowed to do it. That's garbage. That's what Schiff's saying. Oh, Trump said in a call he didn't care about election interference. That proves he's un-American. He's trying to destroy this country. Mr. Schiff, there's publicly acknowledged election interference from the Ukraine to benefit your party. Why haven't you spoken up about that? Now, we're not going to talk about that, and if you try to investigate it, it's a crime worth impeachment. Just real quick to go at the end, just to go on to this. Oh, and the other point I wanted to make about this, it says that expressed concerns about a New York Times article. That's exactly the context of Trump talking to Zelensky, because a New York Times article had came out just before that. That was the big article that talked about, there's actually a problem with Hunter Biden and with what went on, and it announced that, Joe Biden gave that speech. That article occurred in May of this year, before Trump's phone call, right before Trump's phone call with Zelensky. So their excuse here, CNN's excuse, is like, we have to understand these Democratic senators heard some troubling things in the New York Times article. Okay, Trump heard troubling things, also in a New York Times article. So why is it a defense of one group and not the other? The Democratic letter urged Ukraine to reverse course if the Times story was accurate. Okay, that's what Trump said. I urge you to investigate to see if these allegations of Biden are accurate. This section we'll skip. It just says Manafort is corrupt. Now, this is important. It's difficult to conclusively fact-check Trump's claim that the Democrat letter implied that assistance to the Ukraine was at stake. Different people read between the lines differently. But the plain language of the senator's letter does not appear to even hint at withdrawing aid to the Ukraine, and the senators say they were not doing so. That is exactly the situation with Trump. It doesn't specifically say the assistance was at stake. In fact, we now know that the Ukraine had no idea that Trump was withholding the assistance until a month after the conversation. People could read between the lines what they want, but it's clear that there's nothing specifically said. There's not even a hint of withdrawing aid. That's true of Trump, but CNN says Trump's guilty. Sorry? The letter was written while Poroshenko was president of the Ukraine. It said the senators were disappointed that some in Kiev have cast principles aside to their shared relationship with respect to law. Never mind that part. I'm not going to go into it. I did most of this yesterday. But the important thing is you could see how it's 180 degrees backwards. Two people do the same thing. And the media and the Democrats go out of their way to say, the one person who did this committed a horrible crime to damage the country. They need to be impeached. They need to be locked up. And the other person, not only are they great people that should be given every benefit of the doubt, but to even look into them as criminal and hurting the country. I mean, that's unbelievable. Urging an investigation? is this next section. Trump was not the only prominent Republican to wrongly describe the letter. Okay, look what they say. In a tweet earlier on Wednesday, Republican National Committee Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel said, in 2018, Democrat senators wrote a letter to the Ukraine urging them to investigate Donald Trump. That's true. That's not wrongly claimed. Absolutely true. They admitted it. This CNN article admits, yes, that's exactly what they did. They said, keep investigating Trump. Keep giving us evidence. On Thursday morning, Trump retweeted a tweet from his son, Don Jr., that amplified another Twitter user's claims that Democrat letter had asked the Ukraine to investigate Trump. Yes, that's true. It says the letter did not call for any investigation of Trump. Again, the senators urged the prosecutor to not stop existing investigation and not stop cooperating with Mueller because they were worried about Trump's reaction. And they asked if the Trump administration encouraged Ukraine to stop cooperating. Let's go back to this whistleblower report real quick. What's the very first thing he says? The problem, the reason this whistleblower said, my God, this is devastating, I need to speak to someone, was because he claims Trump asked them to initiate or continue an investigation. So can someone please explain to me why because we know that this is the dirty little secret. And by the way, there's a Washington Post article that came out that's basically doing the same thing as CNN. But their big crux of their thing is, well, what the Democratic senators did was legitimate because they just asked to continue an investigation or to not stop an investigation. Or if they had stopped it, to reopen it. And that's acceptable. But Trump asked them to start an investigation. And can someone explain to me why one's shady and one's not? If one can be perceived as benefiting you politically, why wouldn't the other? And the dirty little secret that they don't want to talk about is actually Huber and Horowitz are looking into the Ukrainian 2016 election interference. So it is continuing an ongoing investigation that we have right now coming out of the Justice Department and the IG's office. So Trump, again, did exactly, CNN says, gives all these excuses. Well, okay, here's the deal. One, there was no direct offer of aid or threat or anything like that. So you'd really have to read between the lines to come to that conclusion, and that's not fair. Yep, that's exactly true with Trump. Second, well, there was this New York Times article that made allegations, so that's what they're basing on. Yep, same's true with Trump. Well, it was just about continuing an investigation and not starting a new one. Yep, the same's true of Trump. But notice their language. They dog whistle to you. They say, the Republican Trump inaccurately says. What's the title again? What's the title of this article? Fact check. Trump falsely claims. What did it say? It was a request, not a threat. What's the next thing it says? Republicans wrongly described the letter. You see? And it goes on and on. That's how the media treats this. I encourage you. I go through the whole thing yesterday in my video, so I'll stop there about that. But this is the point I'm making. The Democrats make all these bold claims, and their media mouthpieces. And then anytime you could bring evidence up that casts doubt on their claims, they either ignore or they act completely hypocritical and they leave out relevant information. Like, for example, 2 days ago, the media lied 3 times in one day in significant ways. Number one, they said that acting DNI Maguire threatened to resign unless he was allowed to speak to Congress. Maguire came out emphatically and publicly in front of Congress, so it would be under penalty of perjury, said, no, that's not true. I never threatened that once. That was lie number one. What was that lie designed to do? It was designed to make the American people think like, wow, even these people around Trump that are so outraged by what Trump did. It was designed to say Trump's covering something up. That was the idea of it, right? Number two thing, we saw Katie Tur from CNN. We saw the Huffington Post, all sorts of other places. They took out 500-something words of the transcript of Trump's call. And so it said this, I want to ask you a favor. What Trump really said was, I want to ask you a favor. Can you look into CrowdStrike and Ukrainian election interference? And then the Ukrainian president says, yeah, it's important to do that, blah, 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 blah. And then Trump says, yeah, and I heard you had this prosecutor that got fired, blah, blah, blah. And I heard Joe Biden had something to do with it. You should look into him. They took out all that middle section, though. So it just said, I have a favor to ask you. Can you investigate Joe Biden? That is a lie. That is taking things out of context to smear Trump. That's number two. This is the same media that's being cited by the whistleblower as reason to investigate Trump, as reason for impeachment. The same media that was cited in the FISA reports as reason to spy on people in the Trump's campaign. right? That was number 2 lie. Number 3 lie. This lie is so incredible, it boggles the mind. There was this story. I don't even know if I could pull it up, if I could find it. The story was as follows, that a Ukrainian official said that a precondition for the Ukrainian president talking to Trump was that they had to discuss Joe Biden. Oh, sorry. Let's go. Let's not do that article. But they're all the same, basically. This one was edited, though. ABC edited that. So give it a second. It's just got to load up. Okay? Sounds pretty damning, because this goes to the fact that this was possibly a quid pro quo, right? So this is from 2 days ago. The same day that those other 2 lies I just told. Ukrainian officials say Trump would only talk to Zelensky if they would discuss the Biden case in their July phone call. Now, this goes to speak to, so it was when Trump's asking for favor. This whole conversation was Trump trying to get to take Biden down, right? That's what this article is trying to say. So says a Ukrainian official. Ukrainian officials understood that Trump would only speak to Ukrainian President Zelensky during a phone call. It was clear that Trump would only have communications. The White House released notice of the call. Who's their source? It was clear that Trump will only have communications if they will discuss the Biden case. Leshchenko, an anti-corruption advocate and advisor to Zelensky, told the outlet. It was raised many times. I know the Ukrainian officials knew that. The White House released notes of the call. Trump told... That's it. How is that even a news story? It's 3 paragraphs. I was the only one I heard speak up at the time when this story came up. I said, wait, what? Let me tell you a little about Leshchenko. Do you know who he is? 1. Leshchenko is the actual person who is the one that publicly acknowledged to interfering in the 2016 election because he said he didn't want Trump to win, and he was giving dirt on Trump's campaign aid illegally to the DNC. Somehow, Business Insider forgets to include that information. So the general public that's reading this says, oh my God, a Ukrainian official said that? Wow, that's damning for Trump. They leave out the most relevant fact. Actually, this official hated Trump and wanted him to not win the election from the get-go and is being investigated for crimes. Number 2 problem with this that I mentioned, and this is before I heard anyone else mention this, Leshchenko's not even a current government official. He was fired. How could you... Do you see anywhere it says that? It says... Ukrainian officials understood that Trump would only come to office if Zelensky agreed to talk about Biden. It was clear that they would only have communications if they discussed the Biden case, Leshchenko, an anti-corruption advocate and advisor to Zelensky, told the outlet. Not former, not fired. That's a lie. Number 3. And this is the part I didn't know this until after I made my video. But as bad as those 2 things are, here's the Washington Examiner. If you're already leery of press coverage of allegations that Trump pressured Ukrainian president to investigate Biden, botched reports this week from ABC and Axios will make you more suspicious. They breathlessly tweeted Wednesday evening, just in, an advisor to Ukraine's president tells ABC News... Go away, you. To discuss possible investigation into Biden was a precondition. Axios' accompanying story, which mostly just repeats ABC's reporting, originally bore the headline, Advisor to Ukraine's President says Biden case was precondition... God, I hate when it does that. Precondition to Trump phone call. Sounds big. ABC, for its part, published the original scoop early Wednesday, titled, Ukrainians understood Biden probe was conditioned for Trump's Zelensky phone call. Okay, I already read through what the report initially said. Only one problem with the story. The supposed advisor to the Ukrainian president is no longer an advisor. In fact, Leshchenko has been outside since even before the July 25th phone call, meaning at best he's just another guy who heard something from a guy. But it's actually worse than that. Christopher Miller, whose beats include covering Ukrainian politics, Leshchenko said he did not tell ABC insistence for the leaders to discuss Biden's probe was a precondition. That's one story with 3 bombshell lies. 1, The guy's not a current official, so that's a lie. Second, the guy's actually being investigated because he publicly acknowledged interfering in the 2016 election to bring down Trump. Third, the man himself says, I actually never said what they're saying I said. But it's too late. The story's out in the ether. The redaction's always way less than the actual story. That's it. Like, I don't know. And by the way, I did other videos. You can go back. I do a video. I don't remember exactly what it was titled, but I think it was from last Tuesday, or this Tuesday that we just had. Before all of this information that I'm about to talk about with this Solomon article, and I'll probably go about 15 more minutes, then I'll be done. But I'm going to talk about this Solomon article and summarize it real quick. Before all of that information came out, there were two defenses of Biden's actions, right? Here's the story real quick. I'll summarize it as quickly as possible. Joe Biden's vice president of the United States. He's the point man for Obama dealing with Ukraine, including outing corruption in Ukraine. Understand the situation in the Ukraine is this. There was a revolution where the president was ousted, right? And then a new president was put in. The former president was kind of a pro-Russian president. The new president, Poroshenko, that comes in, the former president was Yanukovych or something like that. The new president's name's Poroshenko. Poroshenko comes in and he's more pro-American and not for Russia. He's kind of an anti-Russia guy. Yanukovych had all these oligarchs that were around him. One of them was this guy who owned this big gas company. Joe Biden's son. At the same time Joe Biden's trying to out corruption in the Ukrainian government, Joe Biden's son's working for one of the people that's supposedly corrupt at this gas company. He's on the board of directors of his company, a bigwig. He's getting $50,000 a month. Biden pressures, admittedly, it was admitted, with $1 billion pressures to get the Ukraine to fire this prosecutor that's looking into this gas company that his son works for. Now, that's incredibly shady. If you say that about, that's reason for an investigation. Even if Biden did nothing wrong, he would surely have to admit, if he was objective, like, yeah, this looks really bad in paper. Anytime I'm using $1 billion US tax dollars to get the guy fired who happens to be investigating my son, that looks really bad. Any objective person, regardless of any other argument, should say, holy cow, that's terrible. It needs to be investigated. Yep. Nope. We've known about this since 2016. The Democrats didn't say anything. The media didn't say anything. We've known that Biden publicly admitted to extorting the Ukraine in 2018. The media said nothing. The Democrats said nothing. And now we know that this story is front page now, and the media is still defending him, as is the Democrats, which proves this is not a scandal of just Obama and Biden. It's a scandal of the entire DNC and the media, who is covering up for this corruption and saying it is criminal to investigate Biden's possible corruption. Anyways, there were two defenses given of Joe Biden. I'm trying to just summarize. I know a lot of this is old hat, so you probably know this, but the defenses of Biden were as follows. One, the investigation into Biden's son was already shut down. Into that company, Burisma, was already shut down. That's a lie, as I showed over and over again, but this new Solomon article makes that very clear. Second, and this is the more interesting argument, that actually Biden didn't want this guy fired because he was investigating his son. He wanted him fired because he was corrupt in general. And they cite a bunch of Obama allies, like people in the EU and Christine Lagarde at the IMF and the Atlantic Council, all groups that are globalist, pro-Obama people that say, yep, we want this guy out, he was shady. Okay? I had argued from the get-go that's irrelevant. It's real simple. I know that it's irrelevant. And I know if this was Trump, the media would go nuts. There'd be people marching on Washington. You want to know how I know that? Let's go back to the story of James Comey. Everybody and their mother wanted James Comey fired. The Democrats wanted him fired because they were mad they thought that he cost Hillary the election. The Republicans wanted him fired because they thought he was terrible and corrupt. Rod Rosenstein actually wrote a letter telling Trump to fire James Comey. James Comey publicly admitted he was not investigating Donald Trump. Yet despite all of that, when Trump finally fired Comey, what was the result? We had to have a 2-year special counsel to investigate Trump. Trump said, I didn't fire him because he was investigating me. He told me he wasn't investigating me. I fired him from all this other crap. But that wasn't good enough. There still had to be an investigation because it was potential. The burden of proof, in other words, was on Trump. Even if you could give other good reasons that a bunch of people wanted this guy fired, the fact that he possibly was investigating you and you fired him warrants an investigation. That's what we were told by the Democrats, and that's exactly what happened. Now, with Biden, they say, oh, it doesn't matter if it coincidentally would have benefited Biden or his family. All that matters is other people said he needed to be fired. My wife's told me I have to leave here soon. So, but I'll wrap up with this. Right, just 10 more minutes, Courtney, if you hear me. So what we have then is the excuse that other people said it's irrelevant. We now know from this Solomon article, and I'll link it here because it's incredibly important that you read it. And I go through this painstakingly yesterday, so you could go through. If you get bored, if you want to check out my live stream from yesterday, I really encourage you. It starts at probably 40 minutes in where I'm talking about this Solomon article. But I go through it line by line and all the attached evidence he has to show what it says. But it basically makes 3 points that I focus on. The first point is, even the defense attorneys for Burisma, Hunter Biden's company that was being investigated, even it admits it tried to contact the interim. This prosecutor gets fired because of Biden. That same day, they're reaching out to the new prosecutor. When they finally contact that new prosecutor, they say, hey, we know that the U.S. officials that said that your predecessor was corrupt lied. They spread disinformation. We know he wasn't corrupt. We know that he was heavily investigating Burisma. But we'd like to work with you and get you in contact with the State Department to kind of resolve all of this. So one, that proves that the investigation was ongoing. Or else why would the defense attorneys... If the investigation shut down, why would defense attorneys be like, hey, just on a whim, we're going to reach out to new prosecutors? It makes no sense. So that defense one's out the window. And defense two, they're saying Biden lied. Now, even if you say, well, maybe these people weren't telling the truth, why would they lie to harm Biden? They're representing his son's company. And what they were saying is they're trying to butter this guy up because they're saying, hey, yeah, it's a shame your predecessor got fired. But hey, why don't you work with us and talk to the State Department and smooth this out? Now, we know that the State Department was actually telling prosecutors all the time in the Ukraine, hey, drop investigations because the people you're investigating, it might make the Democrats look bad. We know that's the truth. So here we have evidence that Burisma, the corrupt oligarch's own gas company's lawyers, are saying, why don't you work with Obama's administration, new prosecutor? Biden was wrong when he said how corrupt that guy was. That's devastating. That ends everything. That does two things. It proves that at least there's a reason for investigating Biden. And second, because Trump was the one who was looking into that, it proves that the impeachment case is totally bogus. If Biden is guilty, and if there is reason to investigate him, then it's not impeachable for Trump to be investigating. Because it is an enormous crime to threaten with $1 billion of U.S. tax dollars for personal gain. And it's not just personal gain. Here's another point that I want to make real quick that I haven't heard anyone else make. So I watched Jimmy Dore's video yesterday where he has Aaron Matei and they're talking about the Ukraine situation. And by the way, they both hate Trump, right? But they're saying that this situation is really shady. Aaron Matei says there's a slight difference because the allegation is that both Trump asking to investigate Biden and Biden asking to not investigate his son or forcing to not investigate his son were for personal benefit. But Trump's situation is a little worse because it was also for benefit for him in the election. There are multiple ways to have illegal election interference. For example, what Trump was accused of and what we know the Ukraine did was getting dirt from foreign agencies to smear your opponents. That's what everyone's talking about election interference. But it could also work this way, to try to bury dirt that you know will hurt your election chances. That's what Biden did. Granted, Biden himself wasn't running for office, but the Democrats, as is obvious, hated Trump more than anyone. And they really wanted their person, Hillary, who, by the way, was in the Biden-Obama administration, her to win. How devastating would it have looked 3 to 4 months before the election if this story breaks that the scandal-free Obama administration that Hillary was part of actually was engaged in all sorts of shady corruption through Biden's sons in the Ukraine? So this was election interference. Trump trying to get to the bottom of this is not just trying to get to the bottom of a very serious crime involving $1 billion U.S. tax dollars, but it's also trying to get to the bottom of 2016 election interference. So Aaron Matei's wrong to say, oh, somehow it's different. And real briefly, I'll just say, and again, check out this document for yourself. I linked it. Check out my video last night where I talk more about it. But the second thing is, Shokin, the prosecutor that was fired, has given sworn statements and affidavits in September 4th of this year that actually he was told repeatedly by the president at the time of the Ukraine, Leshchenko, that Joe Biden wanted the investigation into his son buried. He wanted it closed. And when this prosecutor Shokin refused to do that, Poroshenko said, then I'm going to have to ask you to resign because they're threatening us with $1 billion that our country needs. That is devastating. Now, people will say, yes, but this guy's corrupt. It doesn't matter. If Trump would have fired a prosecutor looking into him or his son, and everyone and their mother said that that prosecutor was corrupt, and then that prosecutor came out and said, my God, I was told I was let go because I was investigating Trump, the media would be going nuts. They'd be trying to talk to this person. They would be taking his word as gospel. There would be impeachment hearings. But with Biden, they didn't care. So that at least warrants an investigation. And the third thing, as I already briefly mentioned, was that these lawyers for this supposed corrupt company were actually working with U.S. State Department officials. They say in their own emails that they had contacts with State Department people trying to smooth out this whole thing. Why, if you're Joe Biden and you say, I want this guy fired because we at the Obama administration think that he's not investigating this corrupt oligarch and the gas company this corrupt oligarch owns. That's what the media and the Democrats' defense is. Biden just wanted him out because this prosecutor was corrupt and was not investigating properly this corrupt oligarch. So if that's the case, why in the world would you then simultaneously be working as the Obama administration, your State Department, be working with that corrupt oligarch's lawyers to try to get this case settled? And if all of that doesn't convince you, and again, it doesn't have to convince you of Biden's guilt. What it should convince you of, there's more than enough here to warrant an investigation. But if all of that doesn't convince you, the proof is in the pudding. What ended up happening? What do we know as facts? We don't know. You could say, we don't know if Shokin was corrupt or not. A bunch of people said he was, and we don't know this, and we don't know that. What we know as fact is Biden and the Obama administration and a bunch of their allies in the Ukraine that they were financing all said that this guy Leshchenko that owned this gas company was horribly corrupt. Right? They all admit that. We know then that this investigation got kicked to a new agency, which I did look up my video on the NABU. That's the agency it got kicked to. This is the exact agency that the Obama administration was improperly influencing all the time before this. But anyways, forget about all that for now. We just know they think this guy was corrupt. They fire a prosecutor. It gets kicked to another agency. And nothing. The case is buried. So why wasn't the Obama administration and Biden and a bunch of people that held contingent $1 billion until a proper investigation, because they wanted to get rid of the guy for not properly investigating this gas company and this guy? Why would they not be screaming and freaking out? They're like, wow, the investigation got buried anyways. Isn't that a coincidence? It just so happened they fired the guy that was looking into Biden's son. A different agency got the investigation, and they buried the investigation into Biden's son. I don't have to convince you, and we don't have to convince the American people, that that proves Biden's guilty. My suspicions is Biden's guilty, and that Hunter Biden's guilty as well. All we need to do is convince you there's reason for an investigation. If I could convince you that there's reason for an investigation, it does two things, and I'll finish with this. One, it shows, because this information has been public since 2016, that the entire DNC and the media apparatus are corrupt because they refuse to actually look in allegations of election interference and of incredible corruption. They've held Trump to a far worse standard than their own people are accused of, that we have more evidence. So it's not just, don't leave them scapegoat Biden and say, okay, then Biden's no longer our candidate. We'll go with Elizabeth Warren. There we go. Now we're not corrupt. No, this is unbelievable corruption from the media and from the DNC. And the other thing this proves is that the impeachment case against Trump, because he mentioned the word Biden, as flimsy as it is anyways, if there actually is reason for a real investigation, then what Trump did, even if he did ask for an investigation into Biden, is not illegitimate. Sitting president should be, especially when you're talking about all the corruption that occurred in the past administration. Solomon has articles where he talks about how Ukrainians are suspicious of the FBI. They tried to get visas to bring this evidence to the U.S. and they couldn't get the visas. They tried to work with the New York Attorney General, and the New York Attorney General wouldn't take the evidence. So given all of that, it's no wonder they reached directly out to Trump and said, can we personally talk to your lawyer and personally talk to your Attorney General? It's not corrupt at all because there actually was a crime worth investigating. The corruption is, one, the alleged crime that Biden and Hunter Biden had. Second, the fact that the intel agencies under Obama didn't investigate this. And even though this isn't corruption, an addendum to number two, how corrupt our media is for not investigating it. Therefore, it's not an impeachable offense at all. As flimsy as the case was anyways, and all the evidence I've given here, it's even worse because Trump's just doing his job. Remember, no one batted an eye for 3 years when they looked into Donald Trump under the Obama administration with Crossfire Hurricane, because the allegation was so serious that there was election interference and possible crimes, we had to look at him. So for 3 years, you could investigate Trump for the crime of possible election interference with foreigners, but we can't even start an investigation into the Democrats, or that's impeachable. That's where we're at here. So, hey, thanks everyone for listening. I really appreciate it. Please, I really encourage you, check out my live stream I did last night. Check out some of my other videos. I think I have good stuff on this. And please share these videos with other people. I have no problem if you take the information here, do your own video, talk to people. The most important thing is to get this information out there. Oh, the last thing I did want to say is, notice that this Solomon article now has been out for 48 hours. And it's not just his claims. He's not saying an anonymous source told me. He actually gives you access to the documents we're talking about. Why hasn't the media breathed a word of this for 48 hours? It totally crutches their entire argument. The same with the Dems. Because they're not interested in the truth. They're not interested in actually solving corruption. It's a lie. It's all about political power. They still haven't addressed this. And why is it that, why aren't there more people like me speaking on this? Yes, Hannity has Solomon on, but remember, Solomon's just a journalist. And he's fantastic, and he's smarter than me, and he did all the work. But he's not going to sit there and explain to you in 2 hours in depth what exactly this means. His job's just to put the facts out there, and then you do what you want with them. What we need is people that are looking at this in depth to be able to articulate why this is devastating for the Democrats' case and for the media's case. So I don't see anyone else doing that, and that's why I'd really appreciate if you could share this video so people could get this information. So please consider liking and subscribing to my YouTube channel, my Twitter channel, and consider sharing this information with other people. I know I sound like a whiner. I do really apologize. I hate doing that. But I hope everyone enjoyed this, and look for me to put more material out soon. So thank you, everyone, and have a good one.